magnetism to it. What is happening is that I believe the Earth's core is slowing. There is a precession that's involved too, so that's called the tilt. And this causes the magnetic field to lessen. So I believe the magnetic field has lessened. And here's the unfortunate shortfall of that, is that it doesn't take as powerful as a punch to cause more damage. So, in cycle 23, we had some matter of fact, the largest X-ray flare ever recorded, an X45. I was on the phone with the director of NOAA at the time of the Space Weather Center. At that time, he was reading the instruments while I had him on the phone during an interview.
That's huge.
Oh, the instruments pegged up until that moment. The U.S. Air Force and NOAA, their instruments only read to 9. As far as they could go was an X9.
Mitch, I want to take a few calls, and then I definitely want to ask you about technology, because it's just a matter of when we're going to get hit. And if we do, I mean, newspapers are going now to iPad formats. Everything's going digital. Those things go down. We're shut down. We'll talk about that in a second. Let's go to Tom in Savannah, Georgia, first-time caller. Hey, Tom, thanks for calling.
Hey, thank you for having me on tonight. I've been listening to your program for about 3 months. Very intriguing and very informative. So many things that are going on in the world right now are just puzzling. I think the rapture is close to happening, and so many things that scientific and otherwise are bringing us to that point. Do you agree with that?
Well, let me tell you, a few years ago, I talked about the possibility that end times was underway. I may be more convinced now than ever. I'm not very religious, but I'm pretty darn spiritual. It's very strange the way all this seems to be focaling in now at one point. Mitch, I think you're about the same way. You seem more spiritual than religious.
That's true. And I do, and because of that reason, perhaps, and because of what we do, George, you and me, that we keep a close tab on what's going on, that we are, and most of your listeners, by the way, are less likely to fall into fear, shock, and bewilderment. Why? Because we have a better general understanding. We have a sense of awareness, which is very important. It minimizes trauma, and many of us have a general preparedness that lessens the fear factor when these events occur, which is a big plus. So you use the words end times, but I like to follow that up with, because end times has such a negative connotation, like the end.
Yeah,
but
which it's not.
Really it's not. It's a transition. I'm not saying that there's not going to be challenges. But, for example, what's going on in the Middle East? Really all over the world, but we'll say with the Middle East. Did you know that Mayan prophecy specifically, directly addresses that? I'm going to paraphrase some items. That in this time of transition, that both the Hopi and the Mayan use, the word transition. Matter of fact, I think I've seen it in the Bible. That a sense of truth, of integrity, will purge. It's going to kind of force its way up. Now, you might think that sounds wonderful. Well, the negative consequence to that is what we're seeing around the world. Those who have power are going to exhaust everything they can to hold on to it. But the shift of energy, if you will, and again, coming from a scientific point of view, I believe it has to do, again, with the charged particles. All those same charged particles that affect the Earth affect each human, because we all have magnetic fields, which also affects the brain, and that has to do with transcranial magnetic stimulation. But I think what we're seeing in the Middle East is in perfect alignment with many spiritual scriptures, whether it be the Bible or Mayan sacred books, that in this end time, that sense of integrity will be forced forward, and we're going to be confronted with ourselves. We'll have a choice. Now, you would think everybody's going to choose the best thing for them. In other words, I have to change my ways. I have to be more open and more honest and have a sense of integrity. But guess what, George? It's going to be a smaller percentage that are going to be able to do that.
I think you're right.
Because of the fear. I don't blame anybody. I do it. When I'm fearful, Unfortunately, if I don't have people around me to tap me on the shoulder, I'll revert back to some old defense mechanisms.
Some old habits.
Old habits that are usually self-defeating.
Let's go to La Corning, Maryland. Lona Corning, Maryland. Sean is with us east of the Rockies. Hi, Sean.
How you doing, George?
Good.
First-time caller, long-time listener.
Thank you.
Yeah, with all this energy being exerted by the Earth, with the earthquakes and the volcanoes and such, isn't it more likely that we're going to see more spirits? I've always seen spirits, and I've actually interacted with one just the other night for the first time where I work.
Oh, really? What happened?
Well, I'm a security guard at a coal mine, and I saw the original owner of the coal mine walking around, who's been dead for about 80 years.
You were sure it was him?
I am positive it was him. There was a picture of him in the scale house where I am, and I saw this man walking through. I went up and questioned him. He told me what his name was. He asked me what year it was, George.
That's weird.
Yes, it is weird. But like I said, I've always seen spirits. This is the first time I've actually interacted with one.
And you think these earth changes might be kicking them up?
I'm thinking that the more energy being expelled by the earth is actually they're able to feed more on it, and they're actually able to manifest more.
Well, Mitch, you're a science guy. You don't get into spirits, but you know what? That's possible.
Well, I'm going to surprise you, George. I think there's something to what he's saying.
Oh, yeah.
I coming from the science perspective, scientifically, we know there's at least 10 dimensions. And this is part of Einstein as well. What divides these dimensions? Well, I believe it's magnetic fields. If there's a flux in the magnetic field, is it possible that we could see the manifestation of other particles? There's no scientific evidence of such. First, let me say that. But I got to say, I kind of think there's some real scientific base for this.
Now, I was going to ask you about technology. Everything is so technologically reliant on each other. Newspapers going digital, everything's going digital. Even your bills, if you pay them online, the first thing they ask you before you get a chance to pay them, would you like to stop your paper, invoices? Would you like to go paperless? What happens when we get so dependent on technology, and then we get hit by the X-flare that shuts down communications that way?
Well, that takes us back to the solar flares and what's going on, and why I believe that 2012 coincides with Mayan prophecy. I think that that's exactly what's happening, that our government, actually the world's governments, that's their largest concern. They certainly have acknowledged and endorsed my equation of the Sun-Earth connection. That NASA's come out and done. As a matter of fact, even the National Science Foundation endorsed it. But their biggest concern is just what you said. That's the satellites up there. What happens if all these satellites go out? And yes, it would absolutely be devastating. These so-called third world countries will actually have a better time of it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what, are they going to ding you for your credit report because you can't pay your bill because they never gave you the opportunity to email them your bank information? I mean, you can't do that. Once the satellites go, that's it.
Yeah, it's. I have a whole chapter on community in actually both books, and that is now would be a good time to think about where you're living, who you live around with, and basically community development, and having a small community type infrastructure. And it doesn't take a lot to do that. I'm not talking about grand scale things, but a flavor of permaculture and like there's some people in my neighborhood, three different people that have about a half acre that have their own gardens. That's going to be pretty important. And then I have a nurse that lives across the street. So this is the 5-point protocol of the Red Cross. someone with has to do with food and someone that has to do with medications or has some sense of that. Someone that has to do with communications, and it's basically it's a co-op. One way to test that very quickly is simply go on a camping trip. For those of you that's never been on a camping trip, I encourage you to do so. Not the part that have the electrical hookup. Go out a bit, do some tent camping, and when you go out for even just a weekend, just do it for 2 or 3 days, and you'll have a better understanding of what it's like without electricity.
That's right. The ones with the outhouses, no running water.
That's right.
That'll do it. Let's go to Diana in Houston, Texas. There you go, Diana. Let's squeeze you in real fast.
Okay. I had a vision about the center of the earth, and I just heard Mitch say something about that it was solid, and I haven't really heard anybody else say that. So here's the deal. The vision I had, the center of the earth is like a crystal with infinite intelligence, and it's got like geodesic planes on it, and that crystal is what's kept us going as the only form of carbon life known in the universe. So does that make any sense at all to you, Mitch?
Well, I think I know what you're talking about. It's a bit beyond my spectrum. I'm not going to. I really can't comment on it. I'm not going to throw it away. I'm going to put it in my gray box. I do believe the Earth is solid. The Earth's core is solid. I know some people believe it's hollow, and there's a whole society down there. So, but this crystal thing you're talking about, that captures my interest. So I'm going to put that aside. George, I know we're running out of time. I just wanted to say a thank you to a lot of the people in New Zealand who emailed me to keep me abreast of what's going on. Let me tell you what happened there.
Sure. 30 seconds, Mitch. Go ahead.
Okay, Churchill, the area in that near the epicenter is a soft dirt. And that was a big cause, just like Seattle, along the waterfront. So that was a big cause of that. It was a shallow quake. It was only 3 kilometers in depth, which I would call shallow. So that is what caused the destruction. It was such bad destruction with that, and it's worse off there than most people know. These are direct emails and photos that I have that no one else has seen, but actually a lot of photos are coming out for it. So I just want to thank everybody. And my thoughts are with you over there, and that's it. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Mitch. And as we've talked about the new Madrid Fault, who knows what could happen there. Up next, Fred Bell as we talk about holograms and warfare.